Welcome to Fear Spiral, the place where true horror comes alive. If you think you're brave enough to face the unknown, stay with us. Because tonight, we're taking you deep into the Appalachian Mountains, along roads shrouded in fog. Abandoned bridges and midnight curves where terrifying things happen. These aren't just ghost stories. These are true encounters, shadowy figures that stalk lonely drivers, vanishing bus stops, creatures crawling beneath the asphalt, and figures that seem to exist just beyond our reality. For the next few minutes, keep your lights low and your senses sharp. Because once you start watching, there's no turning back. These 10 terrifying Appalachian road stories will make you question every late-night drive. If you survive the journey, subscribe to Fear Spiral for more real horror, and comment below which story chilled you to the bone the most. Now, let's begin the first story, and remember, the road behind you may not be empty. The man who walked behind my car, Appalachian Backroad, West Virginia. I've been driving delivery trucks through the Appalachian mountain routes for almost 9 years now. Most of my shifts are during the day, but in November of last year, our company was short-staffed and I had to take a late-night run from Beckley to a small convenience store near Oak Hill. It was a rural, winding road through the woods, no houses for miles, barely any streetlights. I was used to it. But what happened around 2:30 a.m. that night still makes me dread that route. It was freezing cold, maybe around 28 degrees, and a light fog covered the road like a thin blanket. My heater wasn't working properly, so the cab was cold enough that I could see my breath in the air. I remember gripping the wheel tightly because the road curved sharply, and the trees were so close, they almost scraped the sides of the truck. About an hour into the drive, I noticed something odd. A set of footprints appeared along the right shoulder of the road. Bare footprints. At first, I thought maybe they were from earlier that day, but the frost on the ground was undisturbed. Whatever made them had done so recently. I slowed a little but kept moving, telling myself not to overthink it. But the farther I drove, the more the woods started to feel wrong, like someone was watching from deep in the trees. You know that strange tension in the air when you feel like you're being stared at? The back of my neck prickled and every nerve in my body tightened. Around 2:45 a.m., I approached a sharp bend where there's a small pull-off area for emergency stops. As my headlights swept across it, I saw a man standing completely still facing the trees. He wore only dark pants, no jacket, no shirt, and his skin looked pale under the headlights, almost gray. His arms hung straight down, fingers curled slightly, and I swear he wasn't shivering despite the freezing temperature. I slowed down instinctively, not wanting to hit him. And that's when his head turned, not his body, just his head. Slowly, too slowly. His face was emotionless, eyes wide and unfocused, like he was looking through me rather than at me. For a second, I wondered if he was injured or needed help, but something deep in my gut screamed at me not to stop. I rolled forward at maybe 10 miles per hour, not wanting to draw attention. But as I passed him, he suddenly smiled. Not a normal smile. It stretched too wide, like someone who wasn't used to smiling, trying to mimic the expression. I pressed harder on the gas. But then, bam bam, I heard knocks. On the back of the truck. 3 knocks, sharp, loud, close. I jerked the wheel and almost veered off the road. My heart started hammering so hard I genuinely thought I was going to pass out. I checked my mirrors and nearly slammed on the brakes. The man wasn't at the pull-off anymore. He was walking behind my truck. Not running, not jogging, just casually walking. And somehow, despite my speed increasing, he wasn't falling behind. His outline hovered at the very edge of the red taillight glow, his arms swinging unnaturally straight. And every few seconds his head would tilt like he was studying the truck. This isn't possible. I whispered out loud. My breath fogged the glass so quickly I had to wipe it with my sleeve to see. I pushed the truck to 40 miles per hour, then 50. The road twisted dangerously, but I didn't care. Yet when I checked my mirror again, he was still there. Still walking. Not even looking tired. At that moment, pure panic surged through me. I slammed my hand against the horn repeatedly, hoping the noise would make the nightmare stop. I yelled out, "What do you want?" No answer. Just the steady, unnatural walk. Then the truck lurched. It felt like something heavy had landed in the cargo hold behind me. The entire frame shook. I swore loudly and gripped the wheel tightly. "Get off!" I yelled. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. On the back window of the cab. My blood turned to ice. Something was on the roof, or climbing toward the window from outside. The tapping grew faster. Tap, 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 until I couldn't take it anymore. I floored the gas. The truck roared as I tore through the mountain road. I felt it sway on the curves, tires skidding near the edge. I didn't care. All I cared about was getting away from whatever was behind me. After maybe 3 minutes of reckless speeding, the tapping stopped. Every instinct told me not to look. Not to check the mirror, but I did. He wasn't there. The road behind me was empty, quiet, covered in fog. I drove all the way to the convenience store without stopping. When I arrived, the store clerk asked why I looked white as a ghost. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words wouldn't come. I just said the road freaked me out. When I unloaded the back of the truck, I found something near the rear door, a single bare footprint. Clear as day. As if someone had stepped inside the truck. I haven't taken that route at night since. But sometimes, when I'm driving through the mountains and the fog rolls in, I swear I still hear faint tapping on the back window, even when I know no one is there. The Hitchhiker at mile marker 31, Blue Ridge Parkway, North Carolina. I've been driving the Blue Ridge Parkway since I left home at 18. Back then, it was my escape. Long mountain roads, cool air, the kind of silence you can only get in November when the leaves have already fallen and the tourist traffic disappears. Now I'm 32, married, working as a home repair contractor, and I still drive the parkway every time a job takes me across counties. It's familiar. It's safe. Or at least, it used to be. This happened last year, the week after Thanksgiving, on a stretch of road near mile marker 31, just south of Craggy Gardens. If you've ever driven that section at night, you know how isolating it feels. The trees lean in so close, they blot out the moonlight. The fog settles low, thick like smoke, especially after midnight. And the silence. It's the kind of silence that feels like it's listening to you. I remember the exact time, because I glanced at the dashboard when the strange part began. It was 1:47 a.m. I had just finished a late job in Burnsville and was heading home to Asheville. I was tired but wired, the kind of fatigue where your body is exhausted, but your mind is buzzing. I cracked the window just enough for cold air to keep me alert. The temperature outside had dropped to 33 degrees, and I could smell damp leaves and pine. That sharp, earthy scent unique to the mountains after a cold day. As I rounded a bend, my headlights caught something up ahead on the shoulder. A figure. At first, I thought it was a deer, but the shape was too upright, too still. As I got closer, I realized it was a person. A man, tall, maybe 6'3". He wore a long black coat, the kind that looks almost old-fashioned, and a dark hat with a wide brim. His arms were hanging loosely at his sides, unmoving, and he seemed unnaturally stiff. What the hell? I muttered. It's not uncommon to see stranded hikers during the day, but at almost 2 in the morning. On a freezing November night? Out here? My first instinct was to slow down and check if he needed help, but something about him felt off. The way he was standing, too straight, too motionless. Most people shift their weight, fidget, look around. This man didn't. He faced the road like a mannequin. As I approached, I got a clearer look at his face, or at least I tried to. His hat cast a shadow over everything from the eyes up. All I could see was the lower half of his face, pale skin, lips slightly parted, like he was breathing through his mouth. His chin looked sharp, a bit too long. His expression wasn't distressed or cold or scared. He looked expressionless, completely blank. I rolled past him slowly, maybe at 15 miles per hour, trying not to stare, but I couldn't help it. He didn't look at me as I passed, didn't turn his head. But as my truck moved forward, I felt a shift in the air. Like pressure dropping before a storm, something wasn't right. About 20 yards ahead. I checked my mirror out of instinct. He wasn't there. He should have been. The road was straight for another 100 yards. But the shoulder was empty, dark, fog swirling over bare asphalt. At first I thought maybe he stepped into the trees. But there was no movement, no sound, no sign of anyone. I felt a pulse of adrenaline in my chest, but I told myself to calm down. Maybe the fog swallowed him. Maybe I misjudged the angle, but the feeling that something was watching me clung to me like cold fingers. I drove another mile or so, trying to shake it off. The road dipped and curved, thick fog hugging the ground. My headlights struggled to push through it. The trees on both sides looked like dark pillars holding up a ceiling of mist. Then I saw him again. At first, it didn't register. It was just a shape ahead on the shoulder. But as I got closer, the outline sharpened into the same tall figure. Same black coat. Same hat. Same stiff posture. My hands went numb on the steering wheel. What the hell? That's impossible. There was no parallel road. No side trail. Unless he sprinted through thick woods, in freezing cold, uphill, in pure darkness. He couldn't have gotten ahead of me. My pulse hammered in my throat. I slowed down involuntarily. His face was still shadowed. And again, he didn't turn his head toward me. Not until I was directly beside him. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he turned his head to look straight into my truck. I jumped so hard I nearly swerved. His face, what I could see, looked wrong. Pale, almost gray in the headlights. His mouth hung slightly open, not enough to look shocked, just lifeless. But his eyes were completely black, not dark brown. Not shadowed, black, like no reflection, no pupils, no white dot, just void. I hit the gas out of pure instinct, heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. What the hell was that? I whispered, even though I was alone. My breathing became erratic, fogging the windshield. I turned up the defrosting fan with shaking hands, but the worst part wasn't seeing him. The worst part was what I heard. The sound came from behind me. Faint at first, a dragging noise like a long coat brushing against the pavement, then knock. Not two soft taps on the back of my truck. I nearly screamed. No, no, no. I checked my mirror, terrified of what I might see. For a moment, it was just fog and darkness. Then the figure stepped into view, illuminated faintly by the brake lights. He was walking in the center of the road. Slow, steady, head tilted slightly downward. Like he wasn't running or even trying. Like he knew he didn't need to hurry, but with every step, he seemed to get closer, even though his pace never changed. I pressed the gas harder, but he stayed in view. Then, I heard a soft whisper inside the cab. Not from the radio. It was behind me, inside the truck. Stop. I whipped my head around so fast my neck cracked. But no one was there. The cab was empty, cold, the air thick with my own breath. Stop. The whisper came again. This time right next to my ear. I jerked the truck so violently that the tires screeched on the pavement. Get out of here, I muttered, voice shaking. Just drive, drive. I hit 55 miles per hour on that narrow mountain road, skidding around corners I would normally take at half that speed. My eyes darted between the windshield and the rear-view mirror. At one point, the fog opened just enough to give me a clear view behind me. The road was empty, but the moment I exhaled in relief, a hand slid down the outside of my driver's side window. I didn't see a face. Didn't hear footsteps. Just a pale, elongated hand dragging down the glass with slow, deliberate pressure. I screamed and swerved, nearly going off the road. My heart was a wild, panicked drumbeat. My vision tunnel, did I kept driving, accelerating so fast the engine whined. When I reached the overlook near mile marker 28-1 of the few with a bit of light from an old lamp, I slammed the brakes and skidded into the lot. I jumped out of the truck, stumbling, nearly falling on the gravel. The air was freezing. My breath came in ragged clouds. I spun around, scanning the road, the trees. The fog. Nothing. Just silence. Dead, heavy, listening silence. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, chest heaving, waiting for him to appear at the edge of the overlook. Waiting for those black eyes to stare from the fog, but nothing happened. Finally, I forced myself back into the truck, locked every door, and sped the rest of the way home. I reached my house at 2:58 a.m. Shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock the door. My wife woke up when she heard me come in and asked if I was okay. I told her I almost hit a deer. I didn't want to explain what I'd actually seen. I didn't understand it myself. The next morning, when the sun had risen and the world felt normal again, I went outside to check my truck. I told myself it was just exhaustion, a hallucination, a trick of fog and nerves. Then I saw it. On the driver's side window near the back edge was a long, thin smear. Not dirt, not condensation. It looked like a handprint, but longer. Fingers too thin, too long. And on the ground beside the truck, faintly visible in the frost, were footprints. Bare footprints. As if someone had walked around my truck in the middle of the night. I haven't taken the Blue Ridge Parkway after dark since. If a job runs late, I stay in a motel. And sometimes, on cold November nights, when the fog crawls low and the woods go silent, I swear I can still feel that presence. Like something unseen is walking just behind me, waiting for me to stop. Waiting for me to look back. And every time I pass mile marker 31 during the day, I can't help scanning the shoulder. I know one night I'll see him again, standing still. Waiting, hat low, eyes black as the mountains at midnight. And next time, I don't think I'll be fast enough. The Vanished Car, Appalachian Foothills, Tennessee, North Carolina border. I've lived in Johnson City, Tennessee my whole life. The mountains have always been both a comfort and a warning, beautiful in the daylight, unsettling at night. My dad used to say the Appalachians have old secrets, and the more you travel their back roads, the more you start to feel that truth settle into your bones. I never believed him until the night something impossible happened on a stretch of highway near the North Carolina border. It wasn't a ghost story, or at least not in the way you'd think. It was something stranger. Something wrong. The night it happened, I was 27, working as a field technician for a power company. I had been on an emergency call to repair a faulty transformer outside a tiny town called Poplar. It was November cold, dead leaves everywhere, the air thin enough that every breath felt chilled. I wrapped up later than expected, around 1:35 a.m., and decided to take the mountain road home instead of the interstate. It shaved off 20 minutes, and at 1 in the morning, that mattered. That road is narrow, 2 lanes, hugging the side of a ridge. Guardrails are old, trees are dense, and the fog tends to gather thick in the hollows. As I started up the incline, my headlights sliced through rolling ribbons of mist, giving everything that weird, floating quality, like the world wasn't fully solid. I cracked my window an inch because my windshield kept fogging inside. The smell of wet leaves and cold dirt drifted in. About 10 minutes into the drive, I saw headlights appear behind me, just a single pair at first, far, faint. I didn't think much of it. People drove this road at night sometimes, usually locals or truckers familiar with its twists. I kept an eye on them though, because the way the road curved meant anyone speeding could rear-end you. If they weren't careful, the car was gaining on me faster than felt normal. Not dangerously fast, at least not yet, but steady. Too steady. I checked my clock. 1:4 a.m. Fog grew thicker, enough that my view of the road narrowed to a tunnel. The headlights behind me stayed perfectly centered in my mirror, never drifting left or right the way cars usually do around curves. They didn't sway, didn't bounce with the uneven pavement. Just a smooth glide forward. I told myself it was a truck, maybe a lifted one, something stable. But then the lights got closer. Too close. Within seconds, they were right behind me, bright enough that I had to flip the mirror into night mode. "All right, man, go around," I muttered. But the car didn't. I slowed from 45 down to 35. Normally, anyone tailgating would take the hint and pass when they could. Instead, the headlights matched my speed exactly. No hesitation. I felt the first prick of unease creep up my spine. I tapped the brake lightly, not enough to slow abruptly, just enough to flash the brake lights. A signal, a warning. The car reacted immediately, not by slowing, by getting closer. The headlights nearly touched my bumper. I could feel my heartbeat. Pick up that animal-level instinct that something is wrong. "Very wrong. What do you want?" I whispered, even though they obviously couldn't hear me. I turned into a particularly sharp bend, expecting the car to drift or slow down. It didn't. Single quote steed. Its lights followed perfectly, like it wasn't bound by the road at all. My hands tightened on the wheel. My mouth went dry. The fog on the road felt heavier, almost swallowing the sound of my engine. All I could hear was my own breathing and the faint hum of tires. Another bend came, steeper, almost hairpin. The car behind me glided around it, unnaturally smooth. No car takes curves like that. My stomach dropped. I wanted to pull over, but the shoulder was too narrow. One wrong move, and I'd slide straight down a slope into the trees. Around 1:57 a.m., the road opened into a small straightaway, maybe a quarter mile. I pressed the gas, telling myself I'd lose whoever was behind me on the next incline. Hit 50, then 55. The headlights behind me stayed locked in place, not falling behind, not gaining. Just there. And then they did something I still don't have an explanation for. They flickered, not like a dying bulb, more like something passed in front of them for a split second. Something tall. My skin went cold, a deep, shaking cold that gripped my chest. I whispered, "No. No, no." Then the headlights disappeared. For half a second, I thought the car had simply turned off its lights. But even in fog, even without headlights, you can see the silhouette of a car behind you with your brake lights. Reflecting off a. There was nothing. The road behind me was empty. Wide and empty, but somehow, that felt worse than the headlights tailing me. I checked mirrors again. Nothing. I leaned forward, squinting into the fog. Nothing. I let out a shaky breath. My shoulders dropped. Relief swept over me so hard it made me dizzy. "Thank God," I whispered. But then as I rounded the next curve, my stomach twisted. A set of headlights appeared ahead of me. Not behind. Ahead. Parked diagonally across the right lane. Not blocking it entirely, but enough that I had to slow down to navigate around it. They were the same color, same brightness, same height off the road. The same car. It was impossible. There had been no turnoffs, no crossroads, no driveways. Nothing but rock face on one side and drop-off on the other. And yet there it was, parked like it had been waiting for me. My breath jumped into my throat. The fog swirled around the vehicle, thick and slow. I inched forward, hesitant. As I approached, the shape became clearer. A dark sedan, older model. Maybe a late 90s Toyota or Honda, hard to tell. The windows were so fogged from inside that I couldn't see through them. No hazard lights, no engine sound, no movement inside. Just sitting there, waiting. I slowed to a crawl, maybe 5 miles per hour. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Sweat started forming along my hairline despite the cold air. "Don't stop," I whispered. "Just go, don't stop." As I drew parallel to the driver's side, my headlights illuminated the interior through the thick fogged glass. And for a moment, just a fraction of a second, I saw someone inside. A silhouette. Tall, lean, sitting. Unnaturally straight, hands on the wheel, head facing forward like a mannequin positioned in the driver's seat. No movement. No reaction. I couldn't see their face. Just the outline. Then its head turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Not toward the road. Not toward its own window. Toward me. I screamed and floored the gas. My truck lurched forward, tires slipping for a moment before catching traction. I didn't care if I hit gravel or skidded off the road. I just had to get away. As I sped off, headlights exploded behind me, bright, violent, sudden. The car had turned on. It pulled onto the road without the sound of an engine, accelerating far too fast. Within seconds, it was chasing me again. I checked my speed. It stayed right behind me, its lights burning into my mirrors. My chest tightened. Every breath came ragged. Around 2:09 a.m., the road dipped into a hollow filled with dense, swirling fog. Visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet. I slowed, afraid of crashing. The car behind me didn't slow. Its headlights swelled in my mirrors. Closer. Too close. "Please don't hit me," I whispered. Voice cracking. As the road twisted again, I braced myself for collision. But the headlights didn't crash into me. They simply went out, like someone flipped a switch. And then there was nothing behind me but pure white fog. No car. No lights. No sound. Gone. I drove the rest of the road shaking. Every shadow of a tree looked like a standing figure. Every flicker of my headlights off the fog made me flinch. My hands hurt from gripping the wheel. I reached home at 2:34 a.m. I parked half on the lawn, half in the driveway because I couldn't focus on anything but getting inside. I slammed the door, locked it behind me, and leaned my back against it until my breathing slowed. The next morning, under the bright and normal sun, I checked my truck, trying to convince myself I'd imagined everything. That's when I noticed something. On the rear bumper, cold metal still wet with dew, was a smudged shape, long, horizontal. Like something had pressed against it with steady pressure. Finger marks, but too long to be normal human fingers, too narrow, too even. And on the passenger side window, barely visible unless the light hit at the right angle, was the faint outline of a face pressed into the glass. A long face, thin, featureless, like someone had leaned close to peer inside. I tried reporting a strange car on the mountain road to the sheriff's office, but they asked for a plate number. I didn't have one. They said maybe it was a drunk driver or a tired one. Maybe I panicked. Maybe. But every November since, when fog rolls down from the mountains, I avoid that road completely. And some nights, when traffic is light and the air is cold, I still swear I see a pair of headlights behind me, perfectly steady, perfectly centered, following too close, waiting for a moment to disappear again. Or worse, to appear in front of me. The Shadow Runner, Cherokee National Forest, Tennessee. I work as a rural EMT in northeastern Tennessee. I've done late-night emergency runs through the Cherokee National Forest for almost 7 years. And I thought I'd seen everything from drunk hunters falling out of tree stands to bear maulings. Car wrecks, overdoses at isolated cabins, you name it. But nothing, not the blood, not the remote drives, not the silence of the forest at 3 a.m., prepared me for what happened on a fog-covered mountain road last November. It was 2:11 a.m. when the call came in. A single vehicle accident near an unmarked logging trail about 30 minutes south of Unicoi. Dispatch said the reporting caller didn't sound sober, and the location was vague. But a call was a call, and someone claimed to have seen an overturned SUV in a ditch. So I grabbed my gear, radioed in, and headed out alone in one of the smaller response units. The night was cold, 29 degrees, and fog lay thick over the mountain curves. You don't get streetlights out there, just long stretches of tree-lined blackness, broken only by your own headlights. The forest was dead quiet. Even the insects had retreated for winter. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional tick of cooling metal after hard acceleration on uphill curves at 2:37 a.m. I turned onto the forestry road indicated by the caller. It was narrow, barely a road at all, 2 tire tracks beaten into dirt and gravel, with branches scraping the sides of my vehicle. My high beams illuminated nothing but fog and tall skeletal trees. My radio crackled occasionally, but no one was talking. It felt like the world had shrunk down to the beam of light in front of me. I drove slowly, scanning the ditches for signs of a wreck. I kept expecting to see an SUV flipped over. Instead, I saw nothing. No skid marks. No broken branches. No tracks. Nothing that suggested any vehicle had left the road. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4, I said into the radio. "I'm not seeing any sign of an accident. Can you confirm the caller's location?" Silence for a moment. "Static, Unit 4. We're trying to reconnect with the caller." Dispatch finally answered. Their phone went dead after initial report. "Weak signal out here," I muttered. I decided to go another mile before turning around. The fog was so thick my brights only made it worse, scattering the light into a glowing wall. So I kept them off. The darkness pressed hard against the windows. That was when I saw something on the right side of the road. Movement, not animal movement. Not the slow shift of branches in the wind. It was a shape, tall, lean, human-like, moving between the trees. I hit the brakes. Heart punching my ribs. The figure froze. My lights caught it only briefly, a motionless silhouette standing just beyond the tree line. Too still for a human. Too straight. Like a shadow cut out of the darkness itself. Then it stepped backward and vanished into the trees. "Hello?" I called out reflexively, rolling down the window 2 inches. Cold air rushed in, smelling of wet leaves and distant pine. "If you need help, tell me where you are." Silence. Then, from deeper in the woods, a sudden heavy thump. Like something large dropping onto the forest floor. My pulse surged. "Is someone hurt?" I called louder. Another thump. Closer. Something was moving through the trees. Fast. Too fast. "Dispatch, I've got potential movement out here. Might be the victim." I kept my voice steady, even though fear tightened every muscle. I put the vehicle back in drive and rolled forward slowly, shining the side spotlight into the trees. Nothing. Then a blur streaked between 2 trunks. So fast my brain barely registered it. I slammed the window shut and locked the doors without thinking. "All right," I muttered. "I'm turning around." I pulled forward enough to find a wider patch of road and began a 3-point turn. The fog swirled unnaturally, thickening like someone exhaling into the forest. When I switched into reverse, the rear floodlights came on, illuminating the road behind me. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time. A figure stood in the fog behind my vehicle. Tall. Too tall. Shoulders narrow. Arms long enough to reach mid-thigh. Its body was entirely black, like a silhouette cut out of the night. No details. No shine on its skin. Nothing but the outline of a human shape where no human should have been, and it was facing me. I froze. Breath caught in my throat. What the hell? Its head tilted slightly to the side, slow and deliberate, like it was studying me. The movement was unnatural, stiff but controlled. I slammed the gear into drive and accelerated hard, tires spitting gravel. The figure didn't move, not yet, but the moment I gained speed, I saw it shift. Then it started running, not toward me, alongside me, through the trees, perfectly parallel, matching my speed exactly. I drove faster, 25. Then 30 on a narrow mountain trail not suited for high speed. Branches whipped the side of the vehicle. Fog billowed around me. Sweat broke across my back despite the cold. I stole a glance out the driver's side window. The shadow figure sprinted between the trees with impossible speed. Longer strides than a human. No stumbling, no missteps, no sound. Just a dark shape cutting through the forest like gravity didn't apply to it. Jesus Christ. My voice broke. I hit 35. It matched. I hit 40. It surged closer. My hands trembled violently. The road was turning downhill toward the main highway, but it was still a mile out. A mile felt like an eternity. Branches blurred. My headlights bounced. The figure moved even closer, until it was only about 10 feet from the road. Still running. Still matching me perfectly. Then something happened that paralyzed every nerve in my body. It looked at me. Not just turning its head this time. It rotated its whole upper body toward the vehicle, mid-run, without slowing. Its head and torso faced me while its legs kept sprinting forward. The motion was wrong, broken, like its body didn't follow the rules of physics. I felt a scream claw up my throat, but it lodged there. Stuck. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. Stay away, stay away. I whispered. And then it cut across the trees toward my vehicle. Fast. Too fast. I floored the gas. The engine roaring in protest as the vehicle fishtailed on loose gravel. The figure closed the distance in seconds. It was so close I could see its outline overlapping the edge of my headlights. Then, it touched the vehicle. A loud metallic bang hammered against the rear quarter panel. The SUV shuddered violently. I screamed, gripping the wheel. Knuckles white. Dispatch, something's chasing me. Something's static. Only static. The figure hit the vehicle again. Another bang. Then another. Faster, like fists pounding metal at machine gun speed. Bang, 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 bang. I swerved, barely keeping control. The forest blurred. The fog became a tunnel. The pounding followed like a drumbeat behind me. I burst out onto the main road at 2:54 a.m., nearly rolling the SUV as I swung onto the asphalt. Gravel sprayed everywhere. I expected the figure to follow. It didn't. The moment I hit the paved highway, the pounding stopped. The fog thinned. The forest went still. The night returned to normal, just like that. I drove straight to the Unicoi station, hands shaking, stomach twisted, throat dry. I could barely explain what happened to the other EMTs, so I lied. Said I heard animals moving in the woods, panicked, and rushed back. But when the sun rose, and I finally gathered the nerve to look at the vehicle, there were dents, dozens of them. Long, narrow dents running the entire length of the SUV's left side. Too narrow to be fists, too long to be from branches. Like something with thin, elongated hands had struck the vehicle repeatedly. One of the dents was a perfect outline, AHANDPRIN. 5 long fingers. At least 10 inches each. I filed a damage report, but didn't include the truth. Who would believe me? I barely believed myself. I've avoided that road ever since. But sometimes, late at night, on long drives, I swear I see movement in the tree line, something keeping pace with me. Just out of the headlights, running, matching speed, waiting. And every November, when the fog rolls thick and the forest goes silent, I remember that thing turning its head toward me, its faceless body sprinting like the darkness itself had come alive, and I wonder if it remembers me too. The bridge with no sound, 1,500 plus words. I've driven through the Appalachian Mountains my whole life, born in western North Carolina. Raised between deep woods and steep hollers, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on that old iron bridge near Black Elk Ridge. This took place in late October of 2021, right after the first cold snap hit, the kind that makes the mountain roads shine with frost around dawn. I was 30 at the time, working delivery routes for a small hardware supplier. My shift usually ended around 9 or 10 p.m. But that particular night, I didn't finish until nearly 1:45 a.m. because a shipment arrived late. My route that night took me across County Road 68, a stretch of twisting pavement that cut through some of the oldest forests in the state. The kind of place where fog clings low, the smell of pine settles heavy in the air, and houses sit miles apart. I'd driven it dozens of times, but I always hated the part that crossed the abandoned Morrison Bridge, a narrow, rusted one-lane structure suspended over a deep creek. Locals avoided it. Some said it needed repairs. Others said it was haunted. I never cared much for ghost stories, but I knew enough to respect old mountain rumors. They usually had some truth behind them. It was around 2:20 a.m. when I reached the turnoff toward the bridge. The temperature outside read 29 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough for thin sheets of ice to form along guardrails. My headlights cut through patches of fog drifting like smoke across the asphalt. I cracked my window just enough to let in fresh air. The forest at that hour was oddly silent. No insects, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just the hum of my engine and the rhythmic bump of tires on the old road. As I approached the bend leading to Morrison Bridge, I felt the feeling of being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It was instinct. The same instinct that tells you when a storm is about to break or when an animal is too close in the dark. My heartbeat kicked up a little, and my fingers tightened on the steering wheel. When the bridge finally came into view, I slowed. Even with headlights on high beam, the structure looked like something out of another eerie iron latticework eaten by rust. Wooden planks weathered almost gray, the far end swallowed by fog. A sign leaned crooked on the side. One lane, cross at your own risk. I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't have a choice. The detour around the ridge would add almost an hour to my drive, and I just wanted to get home. I eased forward. The tires touched the first boards. And then, everything went silent. Not quiet. Silent. My engine was running. I could see the RPM needle, feel the vibration under my seat, but I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear anything. Not the heater fan. Not the tires. Not even the sound of my own breathing. It was like someone had dropped me into a vacuum. For a second I thought maybe my ears popped, but when I snapped my fingers beside my ear, I felt the movement, but heard nothing. A wave of cold washed over me. My breath fogged the windshield faster, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped 10 degrees. I inched further, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. The silence was so absolute, it made me dizzy. Like my brain couldn't understand what was happening. I rolled the window down to see if maybe the air outside was just thick from fog. Nothing. No wind. No creek below. Just the soft pinch of freezing cold air on my skin. Halfway across the bridge, I saw movement on the left side, something standing at the rail. At first it looked like a person. A thin figure. Shoulders hunched. Facing the water. Wearing something long, maybe a coat, maybe a dress. I couldn't tell in the low light. The fog swirled around them like slow-moving smoke. I stopped the truck, pulse hammering against my ribs. I felt my throat tighten as adrenaline surged. "Hey!" I yelled, or I tried to yell. I saw my mouth open wide, felt the strain in my throat, but no sound came out. The figure slowly turned its head toward me. The movement wasn't natural. It was too slow at first, then suddenly too fast, like it jerked into place. My breath froze in my lungs. The face God, I don't know if I can even call it a face, was pale and blurry in the haze. The features somehow wrong, like they weren't aligned properly. The eyes looked like hollow dark pits, and then it started walking toward my truck, not walking, gliding. Feet didn't move. Just drifting, silently, smoothly, like being pulled across the boards by invisible strings. My body reacted before my brain. I slammed the truck into reverse, tires spinning, but even the screech of rubber on wood made no sound. The silence somehow got heavier, thicker, like I was sinking deeper into it. The figure gained speed, fast, too fast out it reached the side of the truck, and I swear to God, I felt fingers ice cold on my arm through the open window. I jerked away so hard I hit my shoulder against the door. The figure leaned down, its face inches from mine. The eyes were worse up close, dark, sunken, empty, but they felt aware, searching, curious in a predatory way. I floored the gas. My truck lurched backward so violently that everything in the passenger seat toppled to the floor. The figure moved with me for several feet, gliding along effortlessly, until suddenly it halted at the exact middle of the bridge, frozen like a statue, and then the sound snapped back. All at once, my ears rang violently as the roar of the engine, the clatter of loose tools, and my panicked breathing slammed into existence. It was like someone had removed a pair of noise-canceling headphones I didn't know I was wearing. The sudden return of noise almost made me lose control. The steering wheel shook under my grip. The truck fishtailed slightly as I backed off the bridge, tires hitting asphalt with a jolt. I didn't stop driving. Not for a second. I didn't even look in the rearview mirror. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the vehicle straight. When I finally reached the next intersection, a well-lit four-way stop nearly 5 miles away, I slammed the truck into park and just sat there, trying to catch my breath. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. My mouth was dry. My palms were soaked with sweat despite the cold. I kept replaying the moment that thing touched me, the icy burn of it, like frostbite instantly spreading under my skin. I checked my arm under the dome light. There were faint, pale marks on my forearm. 4 long lines. One shorter one, finger-shaped. I didn't go back across Morrison Bridge. Not that night. Not ever again. I took the long detour home, even though it added almost an hour and a half. When I finally reached my driveway around 4 a.m., I sat in the truck for nearly 15 minutes, too shaken to walk to my own front door. The next morning, I called in sick. My arm still felt cold where the marks had been, even though they faded by noon. That evening, out of morbid curiosity or maybe stupidity, I searched Morrison Bridge history online. I found almost nothing official, no news articles, no records of accidents. But in an old forum post from 2008, I found a short thread about the bridge. One user wrote, "If you hear silence on Morrison Bridge, don't stop. Don't look. And don't let it touch you." There were no replies. The user's account had been deleted. I asked around town a few weeks later, trying to be subtle. A man at a gas station told me the bridge was wrong from the day it was built. A retired deputy I used to know said radios and phones always lost signal there. A local fisherman swore he heard voices under the planks at night, but the strangest was an old woman at a flea market who overheard me asking someone else about it. She pulled me aside, eyes dead serious. "You saw it, didn't you?" She asked, "What?" I said, heart skipping. "The quiet one. The one that walks without sound." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She nodded like she already knew. "It can only follow you as long as you're on the bridge," she whispered. "But it remembers faces." I haven't taken County Road 68 since. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind hits my windows just right, I swear I hear that moment of perfect silence again. That dead, suffocating void. And every time I feel something cold crawl across the same spot on my arm, where those finger marks once were, I try to convince myself it's just memory, just leftover fear. But deep down, I know better. Some nights, when I'm driving alone through the mountains and the radio suddenly cuts out for no reason, my heart drops into my stomach. I grip the wheel tighter. I check the mirrors even when I don't want to, because I know the silence isn't just silence anymore. It's a warning, a reminder, a presence, and I'm terrified that someday, somewhere on another dark Appalachian road, I'll look up and see that pale figure waiting for me at the side of a different bridge. The things that crawl under the road. I grew up around the Appalachian Mountains, but it wasn't until I started working night maintenance for the State Road Division that I realized how different the mountains are after midnight. Sounds carry farther, fog settles heavier, and certain places, certain stretches of road feel like they're holding their breath. This happened in November 2020, on a night shift I'll never forget. I was 26 at the time, still fairly new to the job, eager to prove myself. My assignment that night was simple: check drainage clearouts and culvert grates along the old Fire Road Turnpike near Devil's Backbone Ridge, a remote, twisting stretch of highway in West Virginia that's mostly used by truckers and hunters. The area had gotten a week of heavy rain, and we'd received reports of runoff carving channels under parts of the asphalt. Nothing major, but enough to keep an eye on. My supervisor handed me a thermal camera, a flood flashlight, and a warning I didn't understand at the time. Don't linger near the ground hollows after 2 a.m. Critters out there ain't normal. I thought he meant coyotes or black bears. I laughed. He didn't single quotes t. My shift started at 10 p.m. and everything went smoothly until around midnight. The air was cold enough that my breath fogged instantly, and a steady mist drifted through the pines. By 1:30 a.m., the fog thickened into rolling curtains that my high beams barely cut through. The road grew strangely quiet. Even the usual wildlife sounds, the distant owls, the rustle of branches faded away. I reached checkpoint 6, an isolated curve, with a steep drop on one side and a vertical rock wall on the other. The drainage pipe there was known to clog easily. I pulled my truck onto the narrow shoulder, flipped on the hazard lights, and stepped out into the mist. The silence struck me immediately. Not complete silence, but a kind of tense, muffled quiet, like the mountain was waiting for something. The only sound was the soft ticking of my truck's engine cooling in the cold. I walked over to the edge of the road, shined my flashlight down at the culvert, and felt my stomach drop. A large section of dirt beneath the road had been washed out, leaving a hollow gap beneath the asphalt crust. You wouldn't see it unless you were standing right over it, but it stretched nearly 8 feet across. "Damn," I muttered. "This'll need a patch." My breath came out in white clouds, drifting lazily toward the gully. The fog moved strangely, like it was being pulled toward the hollow. I don't know how else to describe it. Drawn in, swallowed, I crouched, rested a gloved hand on the cold road surface, and peered into the hollow. At first, all I saw was dirt, wet roots, and broken stone. But after a few seconds, I noticed the soil shifting. Very slightly. Like something beneath it was breathing. I froze. My heart hammered once hard. Maybe an animal, I told myself. A fox or raccoon. Something burrowing. I was about to stand back up when I heard something move under the asphalt. Not skittering. Not scurrying, crawling. A slow, deliberate pull, like fingers dragging along the underside of the road. I stood so fast I nearly slipped. Crawling stopped immediately. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it over the hollow. Again, nothing, just dirt and wet roots. Forced myself to breathe. "Probably just runoff settling," I said aloud. Though the words sounded thin, unconvincing. I stepped back, turning to return to my truck. Then something pounded against the underside of the road. Hard. I jumped back with a shout, heart slamming against my ribs. The sound was unmistakable, a heavy thump from inside the hollow. Not an animal. Too strong for that. Something big enough to hit with force. I crouched again, shining the beam into the hollow. The dirt shifted, slowly, then faster. Loose earth tumbled down like something underneath was pushing upward. A crack formed in the packed soil, thin at first, then widening. My breath caught in my throat as something pale pressed against it from below. A hand, too thin, too long, caked in dirt, but unmistakably human dash-shaped dot, except for the fingers, 5 of them. But longer than any human fingers had the right to be. And the tip sharp, like they had points. My entire body locked up. The hand clawed downward, dragging long grooves in the dirt, then pulled back into the darkness. I stumbled backward until I hit the guardrail behind me. My knees nearly buckled. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get back in the truck and floor it, but fear rooted me in place. Then I heard a voice. Not words, just a whispering sound, like someone murmuring from deep underground. Soft at first, then rising, layered, overlapping. More than one voice. I felt my pulse in my teeth. My hands shook violently. Something moved again inside the hollow, multiple somethings. Dirt trembled like something large was shifting beneath it, pushing upward. The asphalt groaned under the strain. That's when I realized the road wasn't just washed out. Something had burrowed under it. And whatever it was waking up. I forced myself to stand. My legs were stiff, unsteady. I staggered toward my truck with my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. When I reached the driver's door, I heard the pavement crack behind me. I turned. The hollow sagged downward, then upward, then burst open. A section of road, maybe 2 feet wide, lifted as something pushed up from below. Asphalt cracked apart like thin ice. Clods of dirt exploded outward, and then I saw them, not 1, not 2. 4 pale shapes dragging themselves upward through the broken earth. At first, I thought they were people, thin, hairless, coated in mud. But the proportions were wrong. Limbs too long. Joints bent slightly backward. Heads tilted unnaturally, as though their necks weren't built like ours. Their eyes, God, their eyes were black. Not just dark, but glossy, glassy, reflecting my flashlight like pools of oil. One of them turned toward me. And then they all did. Slow, synchronized movements. Like a pack. My throat tightened so painfully I couldn't breathe for a second. One of them opened its mouth, not to scream, but to inhale sharply, as if smelling me. The sound was wet and hollow. I didn't wait another second. I dove into the truck, slammed the door, and locked it with shaking fingers. The instant the engine roared to life, something slapped against the truck bed loud, solid, like a body hitting metal. I screamed. I put the truck in drive and floored the gas. The rear tires spun for a split second on wet pavement before catching. The truck lurched forward. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. Something hit the truck again, this time on the roof. A scraping noise followed, like long nails dragging across metal. I accelerated harder, hitting 45, 55, 60 miles per hour on the winding road. My headlights barely penetrated the fog. Then, through the mirror, I saw them, 4 pale forms crawling onto the road behind me. Not running, crawling, fast. Their limbs moved with sickening fluidity. Like spiders with human bodies. One of them made a clicking sound loud enough that I heard it through the closed windows over the engine noise. Too loud for any human throat. I pushed the truck to 65 miles per hour. The tires slipping dangerously on the slick asphalt. My hands shook so badly I nearly lost control on a curve. Didn't dare look back again. It took me 15 minutes to reach the ranger outpost. When I finally slammed the truck into park and jumped out, I was drenched in sweat, gasping like I'd run the whole way. My legs barely held me. The night ranger on duty stared at me like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. I told him everything, every detail. He didn't laugh. He didn't ask if I was drunk or hallucinating. He just grew pale, then said, "You were on Backbone Ridge after 2?" I nodded. He swallowed hard, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a radio. "We need a closure notice on 68, he said. Now, within 2 hours, that entire section of road was blocked off. They called it erosion instability. They never reopened it. The next day, I asked my supervisor what the hell had been under the road. He just shook his head and muttered, "They've been there longer than the asphalt. Maybe longer than the ridge." I quit the job 6 months later, sometimes late at night. When the ground trembles from distant quarry work, or when I drive over a hollow stretch of road and feel the asphalt flex slightly, my breath catches in my throat, because now I know there are things beneath these mountains, things that dig and watch and wait, and sometimes they crawl upward. The hunter who shouldn't exist. I work as a utility inspector in the Appalachian region of Tennessee, driving remote mountain roads alone most nights. I've had my share of odd experiences, drunken hunters, bears wandering the roads, and the occasional deer vehicle near miss, but nothing prepared me for the night I encountered him, the hunter who shouldn't exist. It was late November 2022. Around 2:05 a.m., when I left a small substation in the Nolichucky River Valley after finishing routine inspections. The air was sharp and cold, around 31 degrees Fahrenheit, and the fog rolled in low, weaving through the pine trees like ghostly ribbons. My truck's heater struggled to keep me warm, and the windshield fogged constantly, forcing me to crack the window. The road ahead was narrow, 2 lanes, with patches of worn asphalt and jagged edges. I knew these back roads well, or so I thought. About 20 minutes in, I saw him. At first, I assumed it was a hunter crossing the road, a man in camouflage, holding a rifle in one hand, moving slowly near the tree line. But something about him immediately unsettled me. His stance was off. He didn't walk naturally. His knees bent too straight, his steps too measured, like someone practicing a robotic gait. The rifle he carried wasn't swinging with him. It stayed perfectly horizontal, level with his shoulders, as if glued there. I slowed my truck, trying to make sense of it. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking in the fog, "you all right?" The man stopped abruptly, turning his head toward me. His eyes glinted faintly in the fog, reflecting the headlights like black mirrors. The way he looked at me didn't feel human. No curiosity, no recognition, just awareness. He knew I was there. He knew me. "Hello?" I said again. No response. He began moving toward the road. Not across it, toward it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, suddenly aware that even a narrow shoulder wouldn't save me if he stepped fully onto the asphalt. His pace was slow but deliberate, unnervingly consistent. I shifted the truck into drive and inched forward. The fog thickened, obscuring him, but I could still make out the dark silhouette through the mist. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a hunter wandering late, lost, tired. Maybe he was homeless, maybe he was. The radio crackled. My hand shook as I reached for it. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14, I paused, realizing my voice had caught in my throat. I swallowed hard and tried again. "Unit 14, I've got a pedestrian." A loud snapping sound cut me off. Like a tree branch snapping close, very close. I glanced toward the tree line. The man had moved again. No, not moved. Appeared 10 feet closer, almost impossibly fast. The ground didn't show any tracks where he had run. I slammed the truck into gear, tires squealing on the wet asphalt. "Jesus Christ!" I yelled, and he kept pace. I checked my speedometer. 35 miles per hour. The truck was fast, the tires gripping the slick road, yet he didn't fall behind. His silhouette stayed perfectly aligned with the passenger side window. Panic surged. I floored the gas. 45, 50, 55 miles per hour. The narrow road twisted dangerously, hairpin turns and hidden ditches along the edges. My stomach churned. My hands shook violently. The headlights illuminated the fog ahead, but the hunter was still beside me, gliding along, not stumbling, not tripping. Just there. My voice cracked again. "Who the hell are you?" No response. Just the quiet swish of air as he passed, unnervingly close. Then, a chilling thing happened. He raised the rifle, not pointing, not firing, just raised it, level with the truck. My chest tightened. The gun seemed unnaturally long, the barrel reflecting my lights like black steel. My brain screamed, "Run!" But the mountain road offered no options. If I went off the edge, it would be a fatal fall. If I slowed, he would catch up. So I drove. Around 2:18 a.m., I hit a small clearing ahead, a widened stretch near a creek where the road briefly straightened. I swerved to avoid a pothole, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. That's when I caught a glimpse of him in my side mirror, not standing on the asphalt, not running. He was floating slightly above the ground, moving in perfect sync with the truck. His feet didn't touch the road. Not even for a fraction of a second. I slammed the brakes, the tires screaming. My truck fishtailed slightly, but I managed to keep control. The hunter stopped too, hovering mid-stride, and stared. The fog shifted around him like liquid, wrapping his figure in a gray cocoon. I needed an escape. My eyes darted left. The creek was shallow there, but not shallow enough. My mind raced. Then I saw a narrow logging road veering off the main route, barely wide enough for a vehicle. I swerved, tires crunching on gravel, engine screaming. The hunter followed. No footsteps. No sound, just movement. I floored it. 40 miles per hour on the gravel. 50. My truck shuddered over hidden rocks. He stayed in the fog behind me, perfectly aligned. Not sprinting. Not running, just following. I started screaming, though I don't know if anyone could hear me. The air felt thick, oppressive, like it was pressing down on my chest. The mist burned my eyes. I forced myself to focus on driving. At 2:27 a.m., I hit another clearing, a section where moonlight pierced the fog, illuminating a small ridge ahead. I realized something terrifying. The hunter's shadow didn't stretch on the ground. It hovered alongside him, detached, flickering unnaturally. I blinked and it stretched, long and thin, toward my truck, like it was reaching. I swerved again, desperate, trying to get to a more populated area. 10 more minutes of winding mountain roads, fog, and fear. Finally, I hit a paved county road with streetlights. The hunter stopped at the edge of the fog. He didn't run, didn't chase further. He didn't even step onto the lit road. He just stood at the tree line, perfectly still, watching as I passed. I didn't stop. Not for an instant. I drove straight to the nearest convenience store. The fluorescent lights and faint hum of refrigeration felt like safety. My hands shook so badly I could barely grab a coffee. I tried to explain to the clerk what happened. They laughed nervously. One older man nodded and said, "You saw the old hunter, didn't you?" "What do you mean?" I asked. Back in the 60s, a man hunted that ridge at night. Folks said he was crazy, carrying a rifle everywhere. They found him dead one November morning, same stretch of road, same fog. Never found his body proper. Some say he just stayed. I didn't laugh. I didn't respond. I never returned to that stretch of road. Months later, my company rerouted all-night inspections to the main highway. I quit my night shifts entirely, but sometimes, when I drive alone near the forest after dark, I see shapes moving in the fog at the roadside. Not entirely human, not entirely animal, always aligned perfectly with my vehicle. And every November, when the fog rolls in thick and cold, I remember the hunter who shouldn't exist, and I feel the rifle level with my window. The hollow black eyes reflecting my headlights, and the sense that he is still waiting. Watching, remembering. The Screaming Curve, Appalachian Mountains, West Virginia, November 2023. I grew up in the hollers around Beckley, West Virginia, so I thought I knew every back road, every creek, every old logging trail in the area. But some roads, some curves, are different at night. They carry stories, warnings that locals whisper about, but most dismiss. One of those curves was called Screaming Curve by people who lived around Coal Branch Hollow. I never believed the rumors. Until last November. I was 28, working late for a private delivery company. My last drop-off was in a remote cabin rental, and I was heading home via a shortcut through the mountains. It was 2:17 a.m., fog low, temperature hovering around 30 degrees Fahrenheit, wind sharp, and I could see my breath in the dim glow of my dashboard. Road I was on had long stretches of asphalt cut into the mountainside, with no guardrails and steep drop-offs on one side. The locals had a saying, "Don't drive Screaming Curve after dark." I laughed at that as I approached the bend. I had done this route dozens of times. There were no lights, just dense pine and fog, and the hairpin curve rose sharply, surrounded by jagged rock walls. That's when I first heard it, a faint scream. Just a whisper at first, high-pitched, like someone gasping for air. My stomach knotted. I slowed, heart thumping, eyes scanning the fog. "Hello?" I called, voice shaking slightly. "Is someone there?" Nothing. Just the echo of my own words. I shook my head. Probably an animal, I told myself. Deer caught in the brush, or maybe a hunter yelling to a friend. But as I approached the apex of the curve, the scream returned. Louder this time, and different, not human. Not fully. It sounded like someone screaming, and something else mimicking it at the same time. Layered and distorted, echoing off the rock walls. I slammed on the brakes instinctively. The truck skidded slightly, tires gripping the slick asphalt. My hands were sweaty, cold, trembling. I scanned the tree line. The fog was thick, almost glowing in my headlights. And then I saw it, a figure standing on the edge of the curve, tall, thin, hunched slightly forward. Its head swiveled unnaturally as it stared directly at me. Its mouth opened, and the scream came again, raw, piercing, unnatural, cutting straight through my chest. I could feel the vibration in my teeth. I tried to back up. My foot pressed the pedal hard, but the truck felt heavier than usual. My heart raced, and sweat ran down my spine. Then another sound joined the scream, the scraping, like claws on metal. I turned slightly to see the edge of the guardrail, or what little remained of it, scraping as if something large was clawing its way up from below. I floored it forward, tires spinning as I accelerated around the curve. The figure stayed at the apex, still screaming, still staring. But that wasn't the worst part. Behind me, something followed. I glimpsed it in the mirror, a blur of darkness, moving faster than it should, staying in perfect line with my truck. The air around it seemed to shimmer, and the scream followed, echoing in my own ears, layered on top of the sound of my tires. I realized with a sinking feeling that it wasn't just a figure, it was multiple figures, or maybe one that could stretch, warp, and twist in ways no human could. My chest burned, my vision blurred with adrenaline. I pressed harder on the accelerator, hugging the curves, tires screaming on wet asphalt. Each turn of the mountain road felt like a gamble between staying upright and plunging down the embankment. At 2:23 a.m., I reached a stretch where the road straightened. I dared to glance behind me. The fog parted slightly, and I saw the curve and the figures. Dozens of them, emerging from the tree line, thin shadows, all screaming in sync. There. Mouths wide, eyes black pits, and limbs bent in ways that made no sense. I almost swerved off the road. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles hurt. I tried the radio, but only static answered. No cell signal. I was completely alone. One of the shadows raised an arm. Not toward me, exactly, but as if signaling something. The scream cut out instantly. Silence slammed into the mountain like a weight. It was deafening. Then, a new sound. A faint tapping on the roof of my truck. Not heavy, not loud, just tap, tap. Tap, rhythmic. I dared not look. My mind refused to process it. My body screamed at me to escape, to drive, to leave the curve behind. I hit 60 miles per hour, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The curve behind me seemed to stretch, elongating unnaturally, like the road itself had warped. My headlights illuminated only fog, trees, and the fading outline of screaming curve behind me. At 2:30 a.m., I reached a small bridge that crossed Coal Branch Creek. It was narrow, barely wide enough for one car, with guardrails rusted and broken in places. I took a breath and finally glanced in the mirror. The fog had lifted slightly, and the shadows were gone. No screaming, no figures. Just the mist curling over the creek. I exhaled, a trembling laugh escaping my throat, and drove the remaining 5 miles to a lit gas station. My hands were numb, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. The clerk looked at me like I had lost my mind as I stumbled out, nearly falling onto the concrete. I tried to explain, but the words failed. I kept repeating, screaming curve, the screams, the figures, over and over, while my stomach knotted with nausea. The clerk just shook his head, obviously thinking I'd hit my head or was sleep-deprived. I didn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the curve, the figures, the screaming mouths. I stayed home the next week, refusing to drive that road. Months later, I asked around town about the area. Locals told me stories I hadn't heard before. A man had crashed on that curve in 1987, and his body was never found. Hunters reported hearing endless screams late at night, with no one around. One family claimed to have driven past the curve and seen dozens of shadowy figures rising from the tree line, all moving in sync, all watching their vehicle. I realized I wasn't imagining it. I had seen what others had whispered about. Even now, over a year later, when I drive through the mountains at night, I avoid that road. I avoid the fog. And sometimes, when the wind is right and the mist drifts low across a mountain hollow, I swear I hear faint screaming, layered and distant, and I feel the curve waiting for me, ready to reclaim any traveler foolish enough to approach it after dark. I never went back to Screaming Curve. I don't plan to. But the memory is etched into my mind forever, and I know one night the curve will call again. And I hope I'm nowhere near when it does. The Vanishing Bus Stop, Appalachian Mountains, Tennessee, November 2023. I didn't think much of it at first. I was 29, a night shift paramedic in eastern Tennessee, driving home along a rural mountain route I'd used dozens of times. The shift ended at 1:55 a.m., and the night was still, cold around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, with fog drifting through the hollows. The asphalt was slick from a week of rain, and the headlights barely cut through the mist. It was near 2:10 a.m. when I saw it, a bus stop. I know that sounds normal, bus stops exist. After all, but this one shouldn't have. I'd driven this stretch of county road 47 hundreds of times, and I knew every curve, every abandoned driveway, every mailbox. No bus had ever run through this road. Not a single one. And yet there it was, a small wooden shelter, weathered and gray with peeling paint and a rusted bench inside. A single flickering light burned dimly overhead, casting long wavering shadows onto the road. Steam rose faintly from the wet asphalt, giving the whole thing an eerie glow. I slowed instinctively, squinting through the fog. A figure sat on the bench, a woman. She was hunched over, wearing a long coat, hood pulled up, hands folded in her lap. Her head lifted slowly as I approached, revealing a pale, almost translucent face, framed by wet strands of dark hair. "Are you waiting for a ride?" I asked, my voice tense but normal enough. She didn't respond. Not a word. Just stared at me. Her eyes were too wide, too dark. I felt the air along me thicken. My chest tightened, a premonition I couldn't shake. "Hey, do you need help?" I tried again. That's when I noticed it. The bench she sat on didn't have legs. The entire structure seemed to hover slightly above the ground, shaking in subtle, unnatural vibrations. I blinked. The fog thickened instantly. I squinted, and when I looked back, the woman was closer. No steps. No motion of legs. She had glided, sliding toward the road as if the fog carried her. I froze. My breath fogged in front of my face. Heart hammering, I tried to rationalize. Maybe fatigue. Maybe hallucination. The night shift, long hours, stress. But nothing in me could ignore the cold, metallic dread crawling up my spine. I started my truck. The engine roared. She didn't flinch. Didn't move faster. Just kept staring, unblinking, as I inched forward. As I passed, I caught a glimpse of the inside of the shelter. Rusted metal hooks were bent unnaturally, the bench floating mid-air as if something unseen held it. And the fog. It wasn't ordinary fog. It swirled unnaturally around the woman, pulling toward her in silent, slow currents. I glanced in the rearview mirror. My stomach turned. The bus stop was gone. There was nothing behind me but the slick road, the dark pines, and the curling mist. No shelter. No bench. No woman. I slammed the brakes, slid the truck to a stop, and whipped my head around. Nothing. Just the empty stretch of road disappearing into black. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't grip the wheel. My eyes burned from staring. I told myself it was fatigue. My imagination. The stress of the job. But then I saw it faintly at the edge of my peripheral vision, a shadow in the fog, standing in the same spot where the shelter had been. Just a shadow. But it wasn't moving naturally. It didn't sway. It didn't blink. It just watched. I floored the truck. 50, 60 miles per hour. My tires spat water and gravel. I didn't dare look back. The road twisted through the mountains, blind curves, no guardrails. One wrong move and it would have been fatal. But every instinct screamed to leave that spot, that stretch of road, that impossible bus stop behind. By 2:25 a.m., I reached a small town with lights and pavement signs. I pulled into a 24-hour diner, trembling, hands still shaking. The waitress looked at me oddly as I ordered coffee. I just saw something, I said, voice cracking. A bus stop. Out in the mountains. It wasn't supposed to be there. She frowned. County Road 47? Around Screaming Hollow? I froze. Yeah. That's the one. She nodded slowly. You're not the first. People call it the vanishing stop. It only shows at night, after 2 a.m., usually in thick fog. Some folks say it's a trap. Some say it's, well, people get drawn to it and vanish. No one's ever figured it out. I laughed nervously. Vanishing? Stop? Yeah, she said. Don't go looking for it again. I left the diner, but I couldn't shake it. That night, and the nights after, I kept thinking about the bus stop. The fog, that figure. How it had glided, not walked. And the fact that it vanished behind me, leaving no trace. Weeks later, I drove that road during daylight. County Road 47 was ordinary. Just asphalt, rocks, and trees. No shelter. No bench. No woman. Nothing. The forest seemed quiet, uneventful. But sometimes, when fog rolls down the hollows late at night, I can still see it in my mind. The faint flicker of a light, the outline of a bench hovering, and the pale woman staring at me, waiting. And I know, somewhere, that bus stop still exists, only it's not a stop for buses. It's a stop for you. I've avoided that road since. I avoid driving alone after 2 a.m. anywhere in the hollows. But sometimes, when my shift ends late and the fog drifts low across the mountains, I feel the same chilling weight pressing down on my chest, the memory of the vanishing bus stop dot, and I know one day, someone else will see it, and it will call to them.